really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Hey, thanks for being here with me for another episode. I don't even know how many people are listening to this podcast right now, but I'm trying to create a bank of information out there before I really start promoting it so that when people do listen, they can go back and take in a lot of episodes at once. So today we are moving forward on a journey of looking at the ego. And last week I read to you some excerpts from my book, The Journey from Ego to Soul, and we talked all about why it's important to get to know our ego and to learn how our ego operates, and also how we can begin to train our ego so that it doesn't form an obstacle to listening to our higher guidance, to our wiser selves. So in this episode, we're going to talk more about what the ego needs to learn, because this will help us focus in on particular areas where we might be carrying wounds and pain, or places where we may need to look more deeply at our ego and how it operates. And I have with you 5 lessons for the ego, and I actually borrowed these from Richard Rohr, who's a Franciscan monk, but who does a lot of spiritual teaching really now outside of the church and kind of beyond traditional Christianity. And he talked about these 5 lessons that he used to teach many years ago at a men's retreat that he did. And interestingly, a lot of their spiritual work was focused on the ego and kind of how to tame the ego. And these lessons are really relevant, and I like the way he expressed them. So I'm borrowing them from Richard Rohr, though he acknowledged that he has borrowed them from many other people. They're based on universal teachings. He said he's heard them in other retreats in various forms. So we can't really ascribe these lessons to any one author, because they are universal and they are taught in all of the great spiritual traditions. But I'm using the language that Richard Rohr used when I heard him speak about it, because I find it a helpful way to look at these lessons. We're probably only going to talk about a couple of them today, because we will run out of time, but we'll be looking at all of them over the next couple of episodes. So I'm just going to start by telling you, number 1, the very first lesson that we need to teach our egos is life is hard. And I think this is just one of those facts of life that none of us really wants to accept or admit. We all kind of feel disappointed, like it's too bad. But ultimately, when we confront our egos and just say, this is how it is, life is hard. So stop expecting everything to come easily, or to always be positive, or things to fall in place perfectly. Begin to accept the fact that life is hard and will always be hard. We need to accept it in the beginning, because as much as our spiritual work actually moves us toward a place where life starts to flow more easily, and we can actually move through life with more joy and love and ease, as I mentioned, we have to start by acknowledging that life is simply full of a lot of hard things that we have to negotiate and we have to manage. And that's really challenging for our egos, because the ego really feels offended by the idea that life is hard and doesn't want it to be that way. The ego takes it personally, that something went wrong, something didn't work out for me, I got sick, I got hurt, I got betrayed by someone, I got abandoned, like I failed at something I tried to do, like this isn't fair, this isn't how it should be. And the ego, from its stance of always protecting us and looking out for our best interests, always believes that the best thing should happen to us, and is truly offended and upset when what happens to us appears to not be good. The ego is great at splitting and polarizing everything and dividing everything into bad and good and judging on those terms. Think about that in terms of our society, which is primarily being led by the egos of all of the humans on our planet. The ego is really in charge in our society. So when you look at how polarized we are, that's a big reason why, because that's how the ego perceives the world. There's good and there's bad. And good should only happen to me. Bad can happen to anyone else because they're other than me and I don't care about them. That's the ego's perspective at its worst, more or less. But that's what we really want to talk about. We want to talk about the worst behavior of the ego because that allows us to look at ourselves and maybe to say, okay, well, my ego isn't that bad, but I do have some traces of that. There are times when I do pity myself and I do feel sorry for myself. And until the ego can come to terms with the fact that life is just hard, that's how life is, that's how it's meant to be here on planet Earth. It's not my fault. It's no one else's fault. It's just the way life operates here on Earth. Until we reach a point where we can be accepting and embrace that idea and live in equanimity with the idea that life is full of hard things, then we run the risk of becoming perpetual victims, because that's what the ego moves us toward, is always believing that someone else is harming us or hurting us. Someone else is doing something that's making life hard for us. The ego pushes us into this belief system that somehow my life would be fine if it weren't for those other people. Think again about our society and what we're going through right now, and you can see it all over the place. People behaving as victims, feeling bad for themselves, feeling oppressed or injured somehow by the behavior of other people. Now, there is a need for justice in the world and in our society in general, and there's a need for standing up for right behavior in society. And so I support all of the causes that are out there working toward equitable behavior and equitable systems for other people. But I'm primarily talking about here is our individual awareness and response to the world and to the people around us in our lives. Because perpetually seeing ourselves as victims is not an empowered state of being. When we believe that other people can do us harm and they are doing us harm, then we are giving those other people power over us instead of assuming our own power and our own ability to be in control of our lives and of our emotions. Now, again, we can't control what happens to us. That is outside of our purview. We can't control what's happening in the world or in life, but we can control our own reactions to it and our own behaviors in response to what's happening in the world. It's just that it takes work. We can control those behaviors if we learn how to recognize our ego and how to train and tame our ego so that we can use our higher wisdom and higher guidance to help modulate the behavior of the ego in the world, like I talked about in the last episode. So this understanding that life is hard, that's also where the 7 lessons that I teach about begins, with the idea of suffering. Suffering is just part of life. We come into this world in a bloody, painful, screaming mess. And that's just how it is. The world is challenging. But I believe it's meant to be that way. I believe that actually our lifetimes here, I've talked about this before, are a classroom for us to learn. And we learn by struggling with things, by having challenges before us that we have to navigate our way through. And the fact that life is hard means that we have a lot of learning to do, and that life is handing us lots of opportunities to learn things. And I don't know, did you ever see the movie A League of Their Own when Tom Hanks, as the coach of the baseball team, says one of his players wants to quit because it's hard. And he said, of course it's hard. It's the hard that makes it good. If it was easy, everyone would do it. It's the hard that makes it good. And I like thinking about that all the time, that, like what makes life really rich and really deep is that there are challenges we have to go through and negotiate. And to be honest, if everything in life was just smooth and bright and easy, I'm not sure that we would grow very much. I think our growth comes from the raw edge of challenge and struggle and pain. And when we deal with the hardness of life, the difficulties of life, and we learn how to get through those times and what it takes to become more resilient, what it takes to have a higher perspective on everything that's happening for us, that is growth. That is when we're moving toward becoming our best selves. That's when we're moving toward our higher consciousness, and we're activating our higher consciousness more in all of those situations of difficulty. So this idea that life is hard, it's essential that we embrace that. I like it that Richard Rohr states it in just those 3 words, life is hard. And you know what? That's the truth. That's the bottom line. And oftentimes I hear myself, I say that sometimes to my family members, and I say it to myself, like if I'm ever in a moment where I'm starting to fall into self-pity or disappointment or regret about something that's happening in my life, I stop and remember, wait, life is hard. This is just one of those hard times of life. And it's my job to work with it. It's my job to see what I can offer to this hard time. What do I have within me? What is strong within me that knows how to cope with a hard time? Where am I weak? Where am I falling apart right now? And what do I need to work on? So I can honestly look back at my own life and see that every time life was hard, there was something there for me to learn and a way for me to grow. Sometimes it took me years and years before any of that growth happened. That was true after my father's death. It took me years of working on that. And I did see tiny little glimpses of growth along the way, but it's now been 32 years, and I'm finally just now able to turn around and look back at my father's suicide and the impact it had on me and the growth process that has happened for me over all these years from working through that very, very hard time in life. So I want to emphasize that. I think I'm going to share with you these little lessons that the ego needs to learn so that they can become kind of imprinted in your mind, and so that they come up from time to time and you hear yourself reminding yourself, oh yeah, life is hard. Start there and refrain from, number one, blaming other people for the ways in which life is hard. Oftentimes, we can trace our issues to other people. We can often find a connection like, oh, it is because that person did that I'm having a rough time now and suffering. Oftentimes, we can find those connections. We can see it if we look for it. And the ego definitely looks for it. It's always looking for someone to blame for whatever is wrong. But the fact is that behavior of identifying a person or an entity outside of us that is to blame for life being hard, that doesn't help us grow. That is actually taking the easy way out, in a sense. It's placing all of the power of this hard situation in the hands of other people, becoming a disempowered victim and just sitting back passively in a way and saying, there's nothing I can do about it. It was their fault. They did this. They owe me an apology. They owe me something. They did the wrong thing. They have to make it better. When we start by saying to ourselves, life is hard. I'm in this life. I'm here for it. I'm going to go for it. And in a way, it doesn't really matter what other people did or why they did it or who they are or why they are to blame. It matters how I respond to the hard things that come to me in life. And it doesn't matter if someone else is a bad person and they did something wrong and they caused me a hassle in my life. It doesn't matter that much because I only know about me. I only know what I can do about me. I don't know how to fix that person, and I don't really know what their path is or what their issue is. I only know me. And my job is to go within me and look at, all right, this hard thing happened. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to get through it? What can I do right now to make the best of the situation that I'm in? And suddenly it's actually refreshing, and it's kind of a relief when we stop blaming other people, or we stop looking for a way to blame other people, and also when we stop looking for a reason why this happened to me. Sometimes when we're looking for a reason, once again, we're trying to find a place to put blame. And what I've learned is that blame doesn't really belong in this whole equation of life being hard. Blaming anything or anyone, or even blaming ourselves, is not very helpful. So one of the steps that's essential for us to take and to learn is, how do I live with life being hard and make the best of it as it is, and figure out, well, how am I going to get through this? And how am I going to become a better person because of this? What can I work on so that we're moving in a positive direction? Blame and shame and feelings of victimhood always move us backwards into a disempowered position where we're not growing and we're not moving forward. And really part of how we navigate and negotiate life is to be moving forward. The ego isn't great at moving forward. The ego kind of likes just staying stuck in a way and shooting out arrows at other people all around us. So we have to train the ego like, nope, we're not doing that anymore. We're not going to figure out who's at fault or who's to blame. We're going to figure out, what can I do where I am? What can I take responsibility for? What can I change about myself or my attitude or my behavior? How can I become a better person because of what I'm experiencing? So that is lesson number 1. One of the ways that I wrote about in the book, The Journey from Ego to Soul, to work on how do we manage living in a life that is hard, that does contain suffering, is to take a step back from what's happening right now and view life as if you were a scientist in a laboratory and you're really just trying to gather facts. You're really just trying to look at what happened, and you're trying to remove emotion from around it and just simply look at, oh, how interesting. Isn't that fascinating that this happened right now? And what can I do next? What should follow from this event happening? What could I do that might have the most positive impact on this event happening? So it's first of all to remove yourself a little bit from some of the emotion that you're feeling and take that larger view, the galaxy view, I call it sometimes, and think about, what is my best move here? What is my best and highest behavior that will be for the good of me, but also for the good of all? So take that step back. That's one of the first ways of approaching these hard issues in life that come up for you. Also, again, I recommend journaling always and thinking about, how has your ego responded to what has happened to you? What are the emotions that are coming up, the negative emotions around it? Where is there blame or shame or guilt or victimhood surrounding this particular situation? because that will help you be really, really honest with yourself that this is what I feel. And again, take away blame and shame for your ego. Like I explained last week, have compassion for your ego. It's totally normal for your ego to respond this way. And it's totally normal for you to think these thoughts and feel these emotions. It's okay. We're accepting all of it. We just want to be able to look at it with honesty. So it's a good thing to journal about what has happened. Like, for example, I get sick and I feel bad and angry and upset that I'm sick right now. It doesn't seem fair or right. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't deserve it. It's interfering with some other things I wanted to do. So I can write about all of those things that I'm thinking and feeling about being sick, all of the all of the negative thoughts and emotions that I have, and just acknowledge that, okay, this is real. This is the truth. This is how I feel about this. It's not good. It's really hard to be sick right now. And when you can sit with that negativity for a while and embrace it, that sometimes helps it to start to dissipate a little bit. The more you can say, it's okay that I feel bad about this. It's okay that I'm not happy about being sick right now. It's okay that, in fact, I'm pretty mad about it. That's all right. I'm just going to sit here with these negative emotions for a while and allow them to be there. Sometimes, as I said, they begin to dissipate or dissolve away just enough that you might be able to see a little bit of light or a little bit of positivity. Is there something else that's coming because of that? And here's a real life example for me. I had a bike accident a number of years ago, and got a concussion and broke my collarbone. The concussion was the worst thing to deal with because I kept having recurring symptoms over a number of months. Each time I would think I was doing better, all the symptoms would just come back again and just completely debilitate me for a few days. And it was very discouraging and very hard to get through. But what I began to appreciate is that the only way to treat the concussion was actually to just be still and quiet, to not read, to not listen to anything, to not overstimulate my brain, to not watch television or look at my computer. And when I think about that, even now, it kind of sounds horrible, like, oh my gosh, to be deprived of all these things I use for my entertainment and my stimulation and for information. But in fact, during that time, on the days that I had the worst symptoms, when really all I could do was just sit on the couch. I would sit on the couch and look out the window. I would notice the flowers that were blooming in the fields outside of our house. I'd notice the trees. I'd watch the clouds moving through the sky. Those were actually amazing days. The time that I spent just in stillness and quiet and contemplation. And what I began to recognize is like, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter whether I'm answering emails or typing things on my computer or creating blog posts or podcasts or things for other people. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm just here each day and I'm in this moment. And so once I got beyond my anger and my frustration and disappointment that I'd been injured, that I had this stupid bike crash, I could appreciate like, wow, this is a profound time. Like, when else in my life have I slowed down this much and been this quiet and this still for this length of time? Never in my life had I experienced anything like that. And so I began to appreciate it, and I began to, not to say I was happy about it, because that's unrealistic to think we're supposed to bounce into like, yay, great, I had a bike crash. No, but I reached a point of equanimity where it's okay to just be where I am. Right now, this is where I am. I'm healing from a concussion, from a silly bike accident, but that's what life brought me. This is the difficulty that life brought me right now. So I will make the most of it. I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to take in whatever happens. If I have a headache, I'm going to witness that. Oh, what does it feel like when my head hurts? If I have brain fog, I'm going to observe that to the best of my ability, and then later I'll process that and think about, wow, how interesting it was that everything felt so cloudy and foggy to me. It is this opportunity in a way. Sometimes the hard times of life give us an opportunity to step out of the busyness of our day-to-day existence to have more time and more space for stillness and contemplation. And so that's what I learned. There are positive things within every hard and difficult thing. If you're open to it, you will gradually begin to see it for yourself. And you can gradually begin to take that in and allow yourself to say, this part of what I'm going through is okay. This isn't so bad. It's all right. And that's what helps you. Slowly, you thread your way through all the difficulty and the pain and all of the negative emotions that come up. You slowly thread your way through that and find a little something here, a little something there, moving closer and closer toward more light and more acceptance and more equanimity and more peace about what has happened. That's the reality of how it works. It's a day-to-day, moment-to-moment process of constantly working at it, accepting what is, accepting that life is hard, opening yourself up to that, saying how life is hard and however I react to it, that's okay. I'm doing the best I can right now. It's okay. Whatever thoughts come up, whatever emotions come up, they're all okay, because this is me doing the best I can during a hard time in life. Accept all of it. The more you embrace it and embrace yourself and just have self-compassion, then the more you're moving toward that place of equanimity. Again, it might take a long time to get to equanimity, but you're slowly growing toward it. And that's really the goal of how we get through the hard times. The slow, tiny little bit of growth at a time that happens piece by piece, little by little, gradually over time. So for today, we'll end it there and just remember that life is hard, and in the end, it's okay that life is hard. You may not feel that right now. You may just be starting with, life is hard, darn it. But start there. That's okay. Embrace that. Go with it. And hopefully, over time and down the road, you will gradually, as you make more and more space, you will gradually see more and more light coming in to the hard and difficult time that you're dealing with. And that is how you're actually training your ego to not respond automatically and reflexively to hard things by looking for someone else to blame or a way to project the pain out, but to simply sit and be with the pain of the moment. So I'm going to come back next week and we'll talk about another lesson for the ego next week. And until then, remember to share this podcast with other people if you think it will be helpful. And you can also leave a rating and a review wherever you happen to be listening. That will be really helpful for me. I appreciate it a lot. So thank you so much for being part of my audience today. Until next week, remember that we're here for love. That's really what we're moving towards in even all of this accepting of life as being hard. We're moving toward love ultimately. So face your fear, be ready for whatever happens next, and love each and every moment of your life. Bye-bye.